The movie begins with a woman named Cassie Salazar singing while greeting visitors at a club. She sings enthusiastically and attracts attention until the audience cheers for the band's performance. After the show was over, a man named Billy, the club owner, gave them a code to end the show and continue their work. Cassie, a waitress, immediately put on her apron and thanked the audience. Not long after, there was a woman named Nora, a friend of the band earlier. She informs Cassie of the existence of a group of men who are Marines at a party. Knowing this, Cassie instead took a breath and waited for what other trouble the group would make at the club. However, there was a man's voice from the direction of the Marine group calling her name. It turned out that he was Frankie, who was her childhood friend. The two hugged each other with happy faces and asked how they were doing. Even she jumped at him because she was so excited to meet him at her workplace. Cassie introduced Frankie to Nora, telling her that they had grown up together and that he had always taken care of her. Afterward, Frankie said that he and his friends would go to Iraq in the next 2 weeks, so they visited the club to unwind before running their errands. Cassie walked over to the group of Marines and asked what drink they would like to order. Everyone asked for tequila, but a guy named Luke asked for Coke. Soon afterward, she immediately left them to prepare their order. On the other hand, Frankie noticed that Luke seemed attracted to Cassie. But he asks Luke to stay away from her because Frankie thinks Cassie is his older sister and doesn't hurt her. Not long after, Cassie came again to deliver their drink orders. At the same time, Nora told them about Cassie's dislike of the Marines while joking until one of the Marines named Armando teased her. Unexpectedly, his joke actually made Cassie angry and went away from him. Seeing that, Luke walked toward Cassie. He apologized on behalf of Armando because he had a big mouth and they were about to be deployed to Iraq. But she still wouldn't forgive Armando, leaving him to talk to Nora alone. Luke gives Nora a code to persuade Cassie. Unexpectedly, Nora even said that if Cassie married one of the Marines, she would get large death insurance. Suddenly those words made her laugh. Not long after that, her cell phone rang continuously. After receiving the incoming call, she left the club to pick it up. Cassie headed to the parking lot to get in her car and put her cell phone on top of her document that was in the side seat. It turned out that the document contained an overdue rental invoice. After that, she took a device to check her diabetes through the blood and saw the insulin bottle was almost empty. Shortly after, Cassie went to the pharmacy to ask the female cashier to prescribe an additional insulin dose. The cashier explained that the insurance did not cover the extra medicine. The cashier could have given additional medicine, but she had to pay $500 in cash. Not long after, Cassie's mother came to the cashier because she discovered her daughter had no money. She asked her mother if she would pay for the medicine. Her mother took out her money to give to her. But after Cassie counted it, it turned out that the money was still insufficient to buy extra medicine. In the end, she decided to stick with the existing medicine and left the pharmacy. The following day, Luke was jogging by the side of the road. Soon afterward, he heard a shrill sound which turned out to be from a car behind him. But strangely, the car seemed to want to hit him and continued to follow wherever he ran. Just as he escaped by jumping over the iron fence, a man named Jono got out of the car. Jono joked by saying he was impressed to see his old friend who could climb such a high fence. Jono was surprised to learn that Luke had made it into the Marines. He thought Luke would fail the urine test, so he invited Luke to get into his car and enjoy the drugs. Luke refused and explained that now he was clean and didn't do dirty things anymore. Jono reminded him that he still owed $15,000 in the past. Luke assures him that he will pay his debts before going to Iraq. On the other hand, Cassie and her mother returned to her rental house. When she got there, her mother saw a bill for her rental house on the doorknob. Knowing this, her mother felt confused about her daughter's current life, which seemed disorganized. Her mother invited Cassie to live with her in their old house, but she refused because she wanted to stay and work in the city. Hearing that, her mother felt sad because her daughter did not have a proper salary, but she had to work a lot, so her health was very bad. Suddenly, her mother was crying and sat on the chair. She feels guilty for not being able to provide a decent life for her daughter. Cassie sat beside her mother while wiping her tears. She reassures her mother that everything she did was based on her will, so whatever happened to her is not anyone's fault. She hopes that her health will improve and that it won't bother anyone. That evening, Cassie sings again at the club. She was singing as usual, but suddenly she had a little shortness of breath. At first, she was strong enough to continue singing, but when she felt nauseous and dizzy, she finally decided to get off the stage. Afterward, she tried to walk out of the club, but fell and couldn't walk. She immediately took her diabetes measuring device and injected insulin into her arm. After getting a little better, her eyesight returned to focus. Soon after, she saw a Marine Corps badge sitting by a glass window and remembered what Nora had said. The next day, Cassie visits Frankie's house. Arriving there, she knocked on his door, but it was Luke who opened it. Cassie, still angry with him, ignored his greeting and just walked in to meet Frankie. Surprisingly, she asked Frankie to marry her after dealing with him. Hearing that, Frankie laughed out loud and thought what he said was just a joke. She tries to put on a serious face and explains that she has had diabetes since 6 months ago, so she really needs money. Cassie said that her goal was to get married so she could get Frankie's life insurance before going to Iraq, because she would also get insurance if she married a Marine and made a marriage contract. Unbeknownst to them, Luke had been listening to their conversation from the start. After that, Luke barged in and told them that his father was a retired military police officer and that what he would do was a common type of fraud. Cassie tells Luke she doesn't want his advice because the marriage would be perfect for her and Frankie. Luke explains that they are doing this just like committing fraud and illegally stealing from the government. She replied that she did not care about the government, which did not care about the fate of the immigrants who were not treated fairly there. Frankie asked them not to fight because it could end badly. After that, Luke chose to leave the two of them. Cassie asked Frankie if he agreed with her proposal. Unfortunately, Frankie refused because his girlfriend would be very angry with him if he found out he had a wife. He said he wanted to help her, but sadly, he didn't have the money. She said it was okay and said goodbye because she wanted to arrange something. After Cassie left, Luke approached Frankie. Luke asked why her parents didn't help her and watched her. Frankie explained that her mother was a single parent and had to struggle to meet their needs because her father had left them long ago. The next day, Luke went back for a morning run to train his physical. He saw his father and nephew Spence in the garage when he passed his old house. Not long after, his father drove the car alone. After that, Luke approached Spence and asked him to play basketball for a while. Spence takes Luke to meet his mother and father. They were both surprised by Luke's arrival because they thought they would never see him again before he left for Iraq. Spence's father said that Luke's physical appearance looked like his father's when he was younger, then the two of them hugged. Spence's father asked what made him come there after a long absence without a word. Luke says he owes his friend money and wants to borrow money, but Spence's father says he can't help him because he doesn't have the money. Spence's father asked if the debt was related to Jono. Luke nodded, and he had no choice but to pay. After that, Luke returned to Jono's place to give him the money. Luke asked him not to disturb his family again while in the military camp. When he discovered that the money was only a few $100s, Jono was angry because his debt amounted to $15,000. Jono pointed his gun at him, but Luke tried to explain that he had a plan. He said there was a woman who needed insurance and that it would pay off his debt. The next day, Luke calls Cassie and asks her to meet and talk about something at a restaurant. He explains that he needs a script about their love story so they can pretend to be married. But he will give some rules that must be obeyed by Cassie. Hearing that, she was surprised and asked why he wanted to do that, even though yesterday he had advised her not to do it. Luke didn't want to tell his reason. He just said he needed $2,000. At first, Cassie was annoyed that Luke wouldn't be honest with her. Unexpectedly, he chose to leave her because he still didn't want to tell her his reasons. But Cassie, who needed money and health insurance, finally relented. They both finally agreed to do a fake marriage. This way, she could enjoy a year of health insurance, while Luke could get the money to pay off the debt he owed Jono. He asks her to promise not to tell anyone about their fake marriage, then he leaves her and sends her a message. The next day, Luke and Cassie prepare for their wedding. Luke wears his uniform to Cassie's house, while she wears casual clothes. Seeing that, he asked her to dress like a bride, so their scenario looked more natural. After leaving the room, she wore a white dress and looked beautiful. Then they both went to church together. Arriving there, Frankie welcomed the two of them. Cassie hugged and thanked him because he was always by her side until now. Afterward, Frankie gave her a wedding ring for the wedding. Soon after, there was an announcement sounding Luke and Cassie's names. The church leader asked several questions and asked them to say the sacred vows at the altar. The church leader asked them to exchange rings and kiss awkwardly in front of everyone. After that, Luke's Marine friends cheered for their wedding. They sat together at a large table, drinking alcohol. They also discussed the upcoming battle in Iraq while shouting, but Armando made a shout about killing all the Arabs. Hearing that, Cassie was surprised and argued with him. Everyone looks uncomfortable until Luke tries to calm the situation by telling them to stop arguing over something that isn't real. Luke, who felt angry, immediately left them. After that, Frankie motioned for Cassie to calm Luke down and bring him back together with them. Shortly after, Cassie went over to Luke, standing outside the room and looking at the atmosphere around him. He explained why he was angry, but she instead started arguing with him until everyone noticed them. Knowing this, he hugged her and pretended to be romantic, making everyone smile at them. Luke said in Cassie's ear he did this so that their scenario would not be caught, because they could be prosecuted legally if they were caught. In the evening, Cassie, Luke, and his friends stay overnight at the hotel. Arriving at the hotel room, they saw only one bed for the two of them. While closing the bedroom door, she taunts him that his face looks like he's scared from thinking about something. At that time, Luke was terrified that his family would be disturbed by Jono, but he kept quiet and didn't tell her. Soon after, Cassie sat beside him to comfort him because she thought he feared going to war in Iraq. The following day, Cassie saw Luke was awake. He said he couldn't sleep since last night, then he got ready to leave. Arriving at the military base, Cassie saw another family of Marines crying and hugging while saying goodbye to their family. Before leaving, Luke told her they would be under supervision from now on, so she had to be more careful. Luke gave Cassie a cell phone number that said Jacob Morrow. If anything happens to him, he wants her to contact his brother and tell him about their marriage agreement. Luke told her not to give his father any information about them. After that, they both kissed to make it look natural and not suspected by others, then he got on the bus. But his friends enthusiastically lifted Cassie's body so the two could kiss again for a long time. After that, their lives returned to normal. Currently, Cassie can get diabetes treatment for free using insurance and pay off all her debts so she can focus more on her hobbies, namely writing and singing. Meanwhile, Luke gets the life he dreams of, fighting for his country and paying off his debt to Jono. When far apart, they both write messages so that the government does not suspect their marriage is fake. They write letters about their likes and dislikes, as well as their past. Cassie says that music is her life. She had a bleak childhood and was physically abused, but music can calm her down when dealing with her problems. Even though she wrote what she felt into the music, she was still afraid to sing, but maybe Luke could cheer her up. Luke tells about his family's past and his love for the military, where his grandfather and father worked, and he wants to follow in their footsteps. Being a state servant is one thing he enjoys. He wrote about his mother, who had cancer, where he and his father had to stay up late to accompany his mother to her bedside until she died. Luke hoped he and Cassie could be like that someday. One day, Luke talks to Cassie on a video call. It attracted the attention of seniors and military officials who were there. She said she was writing a new song, and Luke's friends asked her to sing it. Cassie told them that the song was not finished yet, and she promised to finish it for them later. The song she is writing is inspired by Luke's last call, and it will be dedicated to American soldiers out there. A few days later, Cassie called Luke and saw a bruise on his face. He and Frankie explained the day was a disaster, and they almost lost a soldier. The soldiers look sad and down, and they have a way of bringing it back with songs and music. To cheer them up, Cassie was willing to sing the song she had promised at that time. Luke and the soldiers listened to the song carefully and enjoyed every beauty of the music and sound that amazed everyone there. Luke proudly claims Cassie is his wife, and she can't hold back the cheers from his friends. A few days later, Cassie called Luke again by sticking her cell phone to the car door. She reported that she had posted her song to various media and small labels until one authority took an interest in the song and gave her a slot at a local festival. Of course, it felt like a dream to her. Luke was also happy to see her succeed in her field. A few days passed, and the festival was held. At that time, Cassie did what she liked. She gracefully entertained the audience with her beautiful voice. Her mother looks very proud to see her daughter, who has grown up, standing on her own 2 feet. On the other hand, Luke is on patrol and guarding the desert with his team. A few days after that, Cassie told Luke again that she was now getting to know many people who were starting to know about herself and her group band. On several occasions, she and her group band were invited to one of the cafes, and everything went smoothly. During that success, Cassie received unpleasant news. She gets a call from one of the officers who mentions that Luke was at war and is currently undergoing surgery on his leg. Hearing this, she was shocked and didn't know what to do. One day, Cassie remembers a conversation with Luke, who had given her his brother's contact. However, she does not save the contact. Luckily, she remembered the name he had mentioned in that conversation and immediately looked it up on an online search page. As a result, she got the person's address and rushed to go there. Arriving at the location, Cassie met a man she thought was Luke's brother. However, he was not his brother, as she thought, but he was his father. She immediately explained the incident that had now happened to Luke, that he was being treated after undergoing surgery on his leg, and that she was his wife. Soon, they immediately headed to the hospital. While arriving at the hospital, Luke was surprised to see his father's arrival. Then came a statement from his father about when and what his goal was in joining the military. Luke explains that he wants to prove that someone like him can also become an officer. Suddenly, Cassie kissed him and told their family that they were married. After that, their family gave them alone time. At that time, Luke expresses his annoyance to Cassie because she has told his family about his situation, and he asks her not to do it again. He worries about their future because his father is in the military police. Afterward, she asked how Frankie was doing about this incident. Luke said that Frankie would no longer be in their lives. In other words, Frankie died in that battle. Hearing this, she cried because she didn't believe that her closest friend had died. Not long after, news spread in various media about Frankie's death. His family said they are proud that their son has become part of the country's frontline, but they feel devastated by his death. Cassie, who had not believed the news, was also at her friend's funeral. Not long after, she met Frankie's girlfriend and told her that Cassie had a ring that Frankie would initially give to his girlfriend after the war. On the other hand, Luke also attended the funeral service and paid his last respects to his friend. The next day, Luke and Cassie meet Luke's father. His father asked if they would live together. They told him that they did not have time because everything happened so fast. His father suggested they think about it, and he would be happy to visit them and help with his son's healing therapy. Long story short, Luke and Cassie were escorted to an apartment so they could live alone, and some of the families who drove them immediately left. At that place, she felt very strange when she had to live with other people. After that, Luke asked her to just go through with it and do what they should do so that his father and the state don't know their marriage was fake. Shortly after, Luke and Cassie rearranged the apartment to make it look neat and comfortable. This will certainly reflect their life as a happy little household. As a result, they try to play their respective roles when Luke's father visits them. A few days passed, and Cassie continued her musical career. Meanwhile, Luke continues to undergo therapy to recover quickly. Thanks to his seriousness, his condition was getting better. While practicing in the park, Luke saw the arrival from a distance and was followed by his brother, who brought a beautiful dog. After that, the dog was given to him on the advice of Cassie to help his recovery. At first, he didn't like being treated like a cripple. But he was suddenly touched after seeing the dog being so smart and looking like it cared for him. So he finally accepts the dog. The next day, Cassie, who had just returned to the apartment, found the doorknob that had been repaired. It turned out that Luke had fixed it, and he could walk a little without using a wheelchair. Shortly after that, she treated his leg wound, then hugged him, and asked if he wanted to sleep together, and they ended up sleeping in the same bed that night. A few days later, they decided to visit Luke's family. Luke asks Cassie to be careful while there because his father is very strict with the law. They gathered and played with his brother's little family. At that place, her sister-in-law saw Cassie looking at Luke sincerely. That night, Cassie was on a gig at an event. At that time, Luke got a call from Cassie's mother, who told them their door was open with a shattered window. Hearing this, he immediately rushed home, and Cassie soon followed him. Arriving there, Luke immediately checked into the house. While walking around the house, he got a call from a man named Jono. He did this to convince Luke that what he was doing was part of his seriousness to get his money from Luke by threatening to expose his lies to the government. At the same time, Luke finds Cassie's condition so weak that she almost faints. It is known she lacked nutritional intake in the last few days. He gave her vitamins while giving her an intimate kiss. The next day, Luke met Jono in a building parking lot and beat him. He reminds Jono not to interfere with his life and family again, or Luke will kill him. Then Luke walked out of the building and threw his gun in the trash. After that, Luke headed to Frankie's grave by bus. He expresses his longing for Frankie and says Cassie is no longer like someone else but his best friend. After arriving home, Luke found Cassie packing her clothes. She tells him about her mother, who has just been visited by a man covered in blood and is forced to admit the truth that her marriage was a lie. He realized that it was Jono's doing. Cassie regrets that her mother is now in danger because of him. Luke apologized and explained that he became a drug addict about 2 years ago, but he had not done that only after his mother died. It is explained Jono trapped him and continued to give him drugs until he became addicted. This later became the cause of him stealing money amounting to $50,000 belonging to Jono's father's customers. For a long time, Jono's father kept warning Luke that he would go to jail if he didn't give back the money. Because there was no other place, he finally borrowed money from Jono. Cassie thinks that the reason Luke married her is so he could pay off his debt. He informed her that he had paid the debt. While crying, she revealed that she didn't want to hurt her mother because she was the only precious thing left. She says she should go to her family's house and file for divorce. On the one hand, Cassie had to prepare for her appearance at one of the concerts. Long story short, the concert went lively and without any problems. After all the band members had finished their duties well and had just entered backstage, suddenly one of them announced that they were invited to Hollywood Ball, the biggest concert event at that time. On the other hand, Luke was surprised to see one of the men, who turned out to be a military police officer, get out of the car and approach him. The officer tells him to pack up as soon as he is charged with faking a marriage. At the hotel where Cassie was staying, her cell phone rang in the middle of the night, which turned out to be a call from Luke's father. He reports that Luke is now on trial by the military police. The next day, Cassie appears in court, where her case with Luke will be held. Not long after, Luke entered the courtroom while staring at her. After the misdemeanor charge was read, he asked permission to stand up and say something. It turns out that he will take full responsibility and ask to drop the charges against Cassie because he was the one who was forced to commit the offense. After Luke's request was granted, he was sentenced to 6 months in prison and dishonorably discharged. For a moment, Cassie still couldn't believe what she saw. Not long after, he looked at her and smiled before being let out of the courtroom. Long story short, a concert in Hollywood Bowl was held. Cassie had time to watch photos and videos of her wedding with Luke on her cell phone before she was finally called for her turn to sing. On the other hand, Luke, accompanied by his father, had to pack up. However, his steps stopped when a war award was given to him on the table. After that, he was escorted by his father to the detention house. Back on stage, Cassie sings a song for her husband. She puts her feelings into songs about something she was afraid of before. How she fell in love with a man, how he talked to her, kissed her, and hugged her until she fell asleep. After finishing a song, Cassie thanked the audience. Then she immediately changed clothes and rushed to Luke's detention house. Meanwhile, Luke said goodbye to all his family members, especially his father. Then his father hugged him and said that he was proud of him. Just as Luke was about to be taken away, they noticed the arrival of a car which turned out to be Cassie. Instantly she walked up to Luke and said they had kept every wedding vow. He replied that it was useless because he would serve a sentence of 6 months. However, Cassie insisted they would still be together even if it was the worst day and was ready to wait until the trial was over. For her, the marriage was real and she wants to spend the rest of her life with him. Afterward, Luke gave Cassie a ring and told her to wait until he returned. She said goodbye and put the ring on her finger. But it was not fake this time because now their love was real. The moral that can be learned from this movie is that the problems we face in life will always have solutions. But if we choose the wrong way of solving it will cause new problems. Try to be honest no matter the circumstances because one lie will lead to other lies to cover it up.